The echo of his laughter froze in the air, mutating into a spasm of silent horror. When the woman he had chosen for her fortune, her eyes dilated like a frightened deer, uttered a name that left him breathless. That of his own mother. "Hello, my dear friend. Curious soul who delights in stories where the heart, with its labyrinth of hidden truths and convenient lies, always finds its way to the light. Today I will immerse you in a tale where a fake marriage, designed to evade an imposed destiny, became the catalyst for a truth so profound that no one anticipated it, not even the protagonists. In the middle of the hall, when the notary pronounced the "yes, I do" that sealed their union before the law, Alara's heart, the modest baker who accepted the farce out of pure desperation, beat with a truth that shocked her. It was not a farce. She had fallen madly in love. What he, Julian, didn't know was that this same truth would reach him, transforming an escape from his own golden cage into the most undeniable of destinies, also revealing a family injustice that would change everything, forever. Alara Rios moved through the small kitchen of El Dulce Refugio, the Sweet Refuge, her artisan bakery, with the familiarity of one dancing a tango with destiny. Her hands, small but firm, marked by the heat of the oven and the constant friction with dough, kneaded with a passion that transcended the mere act of cooking. Every scar on her knuckles told a story of early mornings, of learned mistakes, and of silent triumphs. They were not the delicate, neat hands seen in society magazines, nor those her mother had always urged her to protect from heavy work. Her attire was always the same: a canvas apron splattered with flour, a cotton blouse that, though impeccably clean, showed wear at the elbows, and comfortable trousers that had seen countless workdays. Her dark hair, always pulled back in a messy bun, revealed a face that, despite its youth, already showed fine lines of worry around her large, expressive eyes, often veiled by a barely perceptible sadness. El Dulce Refugio was more than a business. It was her legacy, the dream her grandmother, already very ill, had entrusted to her. It was a small space, imbued with the sweet aroma of vanilla, cinnamon, and freshly baked bread. The exposed brick walls, once vibrant, now looked chipped in places, and the pastry display case, though always overflowing with her creations, showed the passage of time with its somewhat opaque glass. The main entrance, an old wooden door, creaked with each customer who, with luck, ventured into the shop. The corners, full of sacks of flour and sugar, felt cramped. But for Alara, every square inch was a sanctuary, a refuge where the crackling of the oven and the murmur of the mixer were the only melody she needed. She vividly remembered an occasion when the owner of the neighboring shop, a stout man with a greedy gaze, had looked at her with disdain as he reminded her of the rent increase. "Miss Rios, if you can't maintain this, perhaps you should make room for a real business. Your Sweet Refuge barely gives you enough to subsist. It's better for you to give up. Or don't you think that would be the most sensible thing?" Alara felt a lump in her throat, her heart constricted in her chest, and she had to force a smile as she nodded, her hands clenched under the counter, every cell of her being crying out not to yield, not to let that mockery, that humiliation, break her. The bitterness of those words left an ashen aftertaste in her mouth, more bitter than any unsweetened coffee. Alara's life was a constant struggle. Bills piled up on the table of her modest apartment, as small as her shop, but filled with an unwavering love. The money barely covered the rent and, most importantly, the expensive medicines for her grandmother, whose health deteriorated day by day. The condescending glances of some customers, the impertinent questions about her business's profitability, were a constant in her daily life. What a shame that such a young girl has to work so hard at something so modest, and bejeweled lady once snapped at her, while her husband, in an immaculate linen suit, looked at her with a poorly disguised expression of pity. You should find a good husband, my dear. Something to get you out of this. Alara pressed her lips together, heat rising to her cheeks. No, she wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for dignity, independence, and the opportunity to honor her grandmother's legacy. She felt invisible, just a blurred silhouette in the background of their opulent lives. However, behind the facade of the modest and struggling baker, Alara Rios possessed a hidden treasure that went beyond her undeniable talent for pastry. Inherited from her maternal grandmother, a woman who in her youth was an acclaimed chef but lost everything due to a series of family intrigues, Alara had a prodigious intuition, an almost supernatural ability to read people, to perceive the hidden truths behind social masks. She could see the cracks in forced smiles, feel the tension in rigid shoulders, decipher intentions in the hesitation of a gaze. Furthermore, her memory, trained by years of complex recipes and ingredient details, was photographic, capable of recalling conversations, dates, and small details that most would overlook. But her greatest treasure was her vision. Alara dreamed of creating desserts that told stories, that evoked emotions, that united people. A vision her grandmother had always encouraged, whispering to her in her moments of lucidity. True value, my child, is not in gold, but in what you build with your heart and what no one else can see. This ability, this deep knowledge of human nature, remained hidden, underestimated, a silent weapon in a world that valued appearances above all else. She was a diamond in the rough, waiting for the right moment to shine. At the opposite end of the social spectrum lived Julian Montoro, heir to one of the city's most influential and wealthy families. His world was one of polished marble, gleaming glass, and uncomfortable silences. Julian, a 30-year-old man, handsome and seemingly irreproachable, was trapped in a golden cage built by the expectations of his implacable mother, Doña Victoria Montoro, and his fiancée, Camila Valdez, a woman whose beauty was inversely proportional to the warmth of her soul. Camila was the epitome of cold sophistication. Always dressed in the latest Parisian fashion, her laughter, more a tinkle of glass than a genuine sound, resonated through the salons with a superficiality that oppressed Julian's chest. Her comments towards Alara, whom Julian had met on one occasion to request an order for a charity event, were always venomous, wrapped in false sweetness. Oh, Julian, really? A neighborhood bakery for the Montoro Gala? Isn't that a bit risky? I prefer the exquisite taste of renowned chefs. But, well, if you insist, Camilla had said with a condescending smile, her eyes gliding over Alara's apron with barely veiled disdain. And Doña Victoria, his mother, had added with a dramatic sigh, "My dear Julian, sometimes your naivety touches me. Lineage matters, appearances matter. Don't forget where we come from." Both, mother and fiancé, were the personification of arrogance, classism, and abuse of power. Their lives were a calendar of social events, diplomatic dinners, multi-million-dollar deals, while Julian felt like a mere pawn on a giant chessboard, condemned to an arranged marriage that suffocated him. Camilla constantly pressured him with the marriage, hinting at the urgency of the union to secure the future of their respective fortunes, an excuse to cement her own position of power. One day, desperation led Julian to Alara's bakery. He needed an escape. His mother, Doña Victoria, had given him an ultimatum. Marry Camilla within a month or lose access to the family fortune. Camilla, for her part, badgered him with wedding preparations, her voice a constant hammer in his head. Julian, who detested Camilla's superficiality and greed, needed a desperate plan. Upon entering El Dulce Refugio, the aroma of cinnamon and vanilla hit him, a breath of sweetness in his bitter existence. The bakery was such a stark contrast to his cold, calculating world that he felt a pang of something akin to hope. He saw Alara with flour on her nose, and suddenly, a crazy idea, a spark of genius, ignited in his mind. "Miss Rios," Julian said, his voice a little softer than usual, "I need a very peculiar favor. A fake marriage." Alara looked at him, incredulous. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. A fake marriage? The Montoro heir? It was so absurd it made her want to laugh. But the desperation in Julian's eyes was real, almost palpable. His proposal was a gust of wind in her stagnant life. The idea hit her like lightning. On the one hand, it was an offense to everything she believed about love and marriage. On the other, the money Julian offered her for the service was the only hope of paying for her grandmother's operation. Her mind was a whirlwind. "Why me, Mr. Montoro? Why this farce?" Her words were barely a whisper. Julian, his voice somewhat tense, explained his situation. His mother's pressure, the imminent marriage to Camilla, his aversion to the woman, and the life that awaited him. You seem like an honest woman, discreet. And you're not in our circles, which is perfect. There will be no emotional complications. It will be a contract, and in a year, we'll divorce." Julian's words, so cold and calculating, hurt Alara more than he could know. The phrase, "no emotional complications," resonated in her mind like a mockery. Alara felt a lump in her throat. Her heart tightened. A pang of wounded pride mingled with desperation. "No emotional complications?" Alara thought. "He thinks I'm an object, a tool for his escape, that my heart is as transactional as his. He has no idea what he's asking of me, what I feel about love and truth." Her hands trembled slightly as she leaned her elbows on the counter. But the image of her grandmother, her face emaciated by illness, appeared in her mind. The dry cough that woke her every night. Her grandmother's truncated dreams, her sacrifices for her. This was an opportunity, perhaps the only one, to save her. "I'll do it," Alara whispered, her voice firm, though a whirlwind of doubts churned within her. "But on my conditions, and without my grandmother knowing the truth." Julian nodded, his face relaxed, a palpable relief. He handed her a fake marriage contract, drafted by his family's lawyers, with clauses so onerous they left Alara with no right to anything more than the initial payment, no inheritance, no marital assets. It was a document designed to protect the Altamirano fortune from fortune hunters. The humiliation was inherent in every line of the contract, but Alara signed it, her head held high, her eyes fixed on Julian's signature. For her grandmother, for the unconditional love that bound them. "I have to do it. I have to sacrifice my pride, my idealism. But Leo deserves it. My grandmother deserves it. And if this is a game for them, for me, it's survival. And I won't lose." Her internal monologue was a silent lament, a battle between her principles and harsh reality. The following days were an emotional roller coaster for Alara. She found herself immersed in the opulent world of the Montoros, a universe of glitter and superficiality that felt alien to her and often suffocating. Appearances were the currency. She had to learn to smile falsely at social events, to feign affection for Julian in public, to endure the inquisitive gazes of Doña Victoria and Camilla. The Montoro mansion, vast and filled with works of art that to Alara seemed cold and soulless, became her new prison. Julian, in public, was the attentive husband, the man who protected her from his mother's uncomfortable questions and Camilla's acidity. In private, he was a stranger, an accomplice in a farce, distant and often absorbed in his own thoughts. "We look like actors in a play," Alara thought one night, as they dined in awkward silence at the vast dining table. Her hands, which once kneaded with passion, now felt empty, useless. However, Alara's intuition, her hidden treasure, began to reveal facets of Julian that no one else saw. Behind the mask of arrogance and the coldness imposed by his family, Alara perceived a deep sadness in his eyes, a yearning for freedom, a vulnerability that he tried hard to conceal. She saw it in small gestures, the way his hand tensed when his mother scolded him, the almost inaudible sigh that escaped his lips when he thought he was alone, the melancholy gaze he sometimes cast upon the mansion's garden. "He's not the man he pretends to be," Alara reflected in her internal monologue. "He's as trapped as I am, only his cage is gold. There's something more to him, something his mother and Camilla have tried to suppress." Her empathy, her ability to see beyond, led her to feel a mixture of pity and growing curiosity. Julian, for his part, also began to observe Alara. At first, he had chosen her for her humility and discretion, believing she would be an easy pawn in his game. But he soon realized his mistake. She was not submissive. She was dignified. She was not discreet. She was reserved. He watched how, despite the opulence surrounding her, Alara showed no interest in jewelry or luxuries, but rather lost herself in the small details of the mansion's artworks, touching the paintings with a reverence that he found strange. He saw her visit her grandmother in the hospital, sit by her side, telling her stories with a tenderness that moved him deeply. He saw her dedication to El Dulce Refugio, the sparkle in her eyes when she spoke of her recipes, the passion with which she baked. "She's different," Julian told himself again and again. "She's not like Camilla, nor like the women in my circle. There's an authenticity about her that disarms me. Could it be that I was wrong? Could it be that I completely underestimated her?" His internal monologue filled with doubts, with growing confusion. Attraction, an emotion he had believed dead, began to emerge, subtle but undeniable. Obstacles and setbacks were quick to appear. Doña Victoria and Camilla, with their predatory instinct, noticed the growing, albeit subtle, connection between Julian and Alara. They could not allow it. They began to set traps for them, to try to expose the farce. One night, during a formal dinner, Camilla accidentally spilled red wine on Alara's dress. "Oh, my dear Alara, how clumsy I am. You must be more careful with such delicate fabrics. You're not used to them, are you?" Her smile was venomous. Alara, her heart racing but maintaining her composure, simply smiled. "Don't worry, Camilla. It's just wine. Nothing I can't clean." And she withdrew with dignity, leaving Camilla frustrated. Hours later, Alara, in her room, reflected, "They're trying to destabilize me. They want to see me humiliated, broken, but I won't give them that satisfaction. Every attack is proof of their weakness, not mine." And Julian, I saw him, his look of concern. He didn't say anything, but his eyes spoke. It's a step, a small but significant step. Another day, Doña Victoria tried to sabotage El Dulce Refugio. sending an anonymous health inspector to find infractions. Ilara, with her intuition, had sensed something strange in Doña Victoria's insistence that she open the bakery that day. She had gotten ahead of her, cleaning every last corner, organizing everything with military perfection. The inspector found nothing. Doña Victoria's frustration was palpable. Ilara felt the pressure, the paranoia, but every attempt to sink her only strengthened her determination. The search for proof of her own worth, of her dignity, intertwined with the search for a deeper connection with Julian, a search she didn't know she was undertaking. The aroma of night coffee mingled with that of desperation, but also with that of resistance, of the battle being fought in silence. On her path, Ilara found unexpected allies. The first and most important was her grandmother, Doña Isabel. Despite her fragile health, the old woman possessed astonishing lucidity at key moments. When Ilara tearfully told her about Julian's proposal and her dilemma, her grandmother listened with a calmness that gave her peace. "My child," Doña Isabel said, her voice a whisper that was both an echo of the past and a compass for the future. "Destiny has mysterious ways. Sometimes the greatest truths are hidden behind the greatest farces. You are strong, Ilara. Your heart is pure. And true love, if you find it, is always worth it." And then, with an enigmatic look, she entrusted her with an old diary, hidden at the bottom of a chest. "This belonged to your great-grandmother. She also knew the secrets of the Montoros. Read it carefully." Her grandmother's words were a balm for her wounded soul, a reminder that she was not alone in this strange odyssey. The second ally was Don Manuel, the old baker from the corner, a lifelong loyal friend of the Rios family. With his face furrowed by wrinkles and his hands covered in flour, Don Manuel had watched Ilara grow up and had always admired her dedication. When Ilara's bakery was under the scrutiny of inspectors, Don Manuel, with his network of contacts in the neighborhood, warned her about Doña Victoria's suspicious movements. "Be careful, Ilara. I've heard that Mrs. Montoro is pulling strings. They want to sink you. But don't worry, I've got your back." His help was crucial. Don Manuel not only gave her practical advice on how to handle bureaucracy, but also offered her moral support, reminding her that her talent was her true wealth. "Your bread is the best in the city, Ilara, and your heart the biggest. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Their conversations were simple but full of wisdom that calmed Ilara's spirit. Her great-grandmother's diary, revealed by Doña Isabel, contained an explosive truth. In its yellowed pages, Ilara discovered that the Montoro fortune had not been forged solely by the cunning of its founder, but a significant part had been amassed through theft. Centuries ago, an ancestor of the Montoros had stripped a famous pastry chef, an ancestor of Ilara, of his secret formula for a series of revolutionary desserts, the basis of a confectionery empire that had been the origin of the Montoro fortune. There had been a hidden contract, a promise of association, and a subsequent betrayal, erasing her ancestor's name from history and attributing the genius to the Montoro family. Furthermore, the diary hinted at a secret clause in the Montoro founder's original will. If in any generation the main heir did not marry for love, the fortune would be redistributed to charitable causes related to art and education, or to the descendants of those from whom the fortune had been taken. The irony was brutal. Her own family, the Montoros, had swindled them, and Julian was about to marry without love, which could activate that clause. The revelation hit Ilara with devastating force. She gasped. The clock on the nightstand showed 3 in the morning. Her hands trembled, holding the diary as if it were an explosive treasure. Rage, pain, and a cold fury invaded her. her lineage, her grandmother, her life, everything was connected to this farce. The tension in the Montoro mansion became unbearable as the date of Ilara and Julian's divorce and Julian and Camilla's imminent marriage approached. Doña Victoria and Camilla, sensing that the fake marriage was slipping out of their hands, intensified their attacks. One afternoon, during Camilla's wedding dress fitting, Doña Victoria, with a malicious smile, told Ilara, "My dear Ilara, you've been very useful, but it's time for you to leave. Your contract ends soon, and please don't forget your things. We don't want you to take anything that doesn't belong to you. People like you, you know." The tone of her voice was a whip. Ilara stared at her with a calm that disarmed Doña Victoria. "Don't worry, Doña Victoria. I won't take anything that doesn't belong to me. And as for what does belong to me, that's another story." Her answer, laden with hidden meaning, made Doña Victoria's smile freeze. Camilla, for her part, became more aggressive. On one occasion, while Ilara and Julian were attending a gala dinner, Camilla approached Julian and, speaking loudly for Ilara to hear, said, "Julian, my love, it won't be long until all this is over. That farce, it's done. Soon we'll be together, as it always should have been." Then she turned to Ilara with a cruel smile. "Enjoy your last days of luxury, Ilara. It won't last long." Ilara felt a pang of pain, seeing Julian's conflicted gaze. Here it is, Ilara thought. They've discovered Julian feels something. They want to rush things. But it's too late. I have the truth, and I'll use it. I'm not hiding anymore. I'll face them head on. For my grandmother, for my ancestors, for the love I feel for Julian, a love he doesn't yet recognize. But he will. Her internal monologue focused on the imminent confrontation, on every detail of the plan, on every word she would say. Fear had been replaced by a cold fury and an unbreakable determination. The day of the annual Montoro family gala, which coincidentally would also be the night the date of Julian and Camilla's marriage would be officially announced, arrived with an atmosphere of electric tension. The grand hall of the Montoro mansion was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, guests wore their finest attire, and the air buzzed with rumors and expectations. Doña Victoria, dressed in a sumptuous silk gown, smiled with a smugness that turned Ilara's stomach. Camilla, in a princess-worthy dress, seemed the embodiment of victory, her eyes casting triumphant glances at Ilara, who, for her part, wore a simple but elegant dress she had designed herself, in an emerald green tone that highlighted her gaze. The dress, however, had a subtle detail, a delicate embroidery of what appeared to be an ancient baking symbol, the same one she had found in her great-grandmother's diary. Julian stood by her side, pale, his gaze oscillating between concern for Ilara and the pressure from his mother. He knew this night would be decisive, but he had no idea how decisive. When Doña Victoria took the microphone to give her welcoming speech and announce Julian and Camilla's engagement, the murmuring of the crowd ceased. All eyes were on her. Friends, family, it is an honor to gather you today to celebrate the prosperity of our family and the bright future of the Montoros. Today, with great joy, my son Julian and the charming Camila Valdez. But before she could finish the sentence, a clear and serene voice resonated through the hall. Excuse the interruption, Doña Victoria, but there is something that must be announced before any future is sealed. It was Ilara. She had stepped forward, her figure, once so discreet, now radiated an undeniable presence. Her voice, though not a shout, filled every corner of the vast hall. Doña Victoria looked at her with fury, her face contorted. "Alara, what on earth do you think you're doing? How dare you? Security! Get her out of here right now!" But the guard, seeing Alara's calm and the presence of Don Manuel and Dr. Vera, who had silently entered one side of the hall, hesitated. "I am doing what must be done, Doña Victoria. Bringing the truth to light," Alara replied, not taking her eyes off the Montoro matriarch. "You have demanded a fake marriage, a farce, to secure a future that does not belong to you. But there are truths that cannot be silenced." She took from a small purse a bundle of old documents, yellowed by time, but impeccably preserved. "This is my great-grandmother's diary, a record of an injustice dating back centuries. And this," she continued, pulling out another document, "is the original will of the Montoro founder, with a clause that you have tried to erase from history." Dr. Vera, by her side, stepped forward. "I can certify the authenticity of these documents. Throughout my investigation, in collaboration with Miss Ilara Rios, we have uncovered a profound manipulation of the Montoro family's genealogical and financial history. Images of the diary, the ancient recipes, and the original will appeared on the giant screens that were supposed to project Foundation videos. The room plunged into a controlled chaos of murmurs and exclamations. Ilara, her voice unwavering, continued. "The true origin of the Montoro fortune was not just cunning, but the theft of the intellectual property of my ancestors, the true master confectioners of this city. And the original will stipulates that if a principal heir does not marry for love, the fortune must be redistributed. Julian did not marry Camilla for love. He asked me for a fake marriage to avoid her. A marriage that for one of us stopped being a farce a long time ago." Her gaze fell on Julian, her eyes shining with a truth he could not ignore. The reactions were visceral. Doña Victoria, upon seeing the images and hearing the words, gasped. Her face, previously so pale, turned grayish, her eyes bloodshot. A groan of rage and humiliation escaped her lips. She tried to scream, but the words choked in her throat, replaced by incomprehensible stammering. Her body shook with uncontrollable trembling. Camilla, for her part, let out a piercing scream. "No, you're lying. She's an imposter, a fortune hunter." Her elegant dress seemed to suffocate her, her face contorted by uncontrolled fury, her eyes shooting daggers of hatred towards Ilara. She tried to lunge at her, but a couple of guests managed to restrain her. Julian, in the midst of all the chaos, had been observing Ilara, his family, the screens. The revelation that he was not Leo's biological father, and the truth about the fortune, hit him with devastating force. His face was livid, his eyes reflecting profound shock and heartbreaking pain. But when Ilara said that for one of us, the marriage was no longer a farce, his eyes met hers, and at that instant, amidst the uproar, a wave of understanding flooded him. His heart, which had been cold and distant, filled with overwhelming warmth. He had fallen in love with her, truly. With a determination he had never before possessed, Julian stepped forward, interposing himself between Ilara and his furious mother and fiancée. "Enough." His voice, though low, resonated with an authority he had never shown. "Ilara speaks the truth. I proposed the fake marriage to her, and she is right. For me, too, it has ceased to be a farce." The silence that followed his words was more deafening than any scream. The shift in power was instant, total. The guests, previously whispering, now exclaimed loudly, pointing at Doña Victoria and Camilla, disbelief and astonishment on their faces. A team of police officers, previously alerted by Dr. Vera, discreetly entered the hall. Ilara, her gaze firm, addressed them. These documents are proof of fraud and usurpation of an ancestral legacy, and the farce of a fake marriage. The Montoro fortune must be audited and restructured according to its founder's original will. The arrest warrant for Doña Victoria and Camila was issued. Doña Victoria, seeing the police approach, let out a sharp cry and fainted into the arms of Ricardo, who held her with a look of deep betrayal and desolation. Camila, hysterical, was escorted out of the hall. The night that was supposed to be a triumph for the Montoros had become their deepest humiliation, the beginning of their visceral downfall. The fall of Doña Victoria Montoro and Camila Valdez was as precipitous as their arrogance had been excessive. The revelation of the truth about the fortune and Julian's origin shook the foundations of high society, turning them into outcasts. The press, with an unprecedented media feast, unearthed every detail of their intrigues. Headlines about the fraudulent matriarch and the fake wedding that unveiled an empire of lies sold like hotcakes. Legal investigations revealed not only the falsification of genealogical documents, but a series of embezzlements of funds from the Montoro Foundation and the diversion of properties to tax havens. Doña Victoria, once an imposing figure, was stripped of her honorary titles, her social influence, and most of her fortune. Her trial was a circus where Ilara's evidence, Julian's testimony, and Dr. Vera's irrefutable proofs left no room for doubt. She was sentenced to a long prison term, her name and that of the Montoro family forever stained by shame. Camila, for her part, tried to escape justice, but was captured and also faced charges of conspiracy and perjury. Her network of elite friends dissolved instantly. Those who once flattered her now despised her, erasing her existence from their lives. Her life of luxury vanished, replaced by the harsh reality of a cell, and the judgment of a society that, though hypocritical, did not forgive the public mockery of its fallen idols. The mansion, once a symbol of their power, felt like an iron cage. Ilara's triumph, in contrast, was resplendent, a meteoric rise that went far beyond the material. From the modest baker who accepted a farce out of love for her grandmother, she became the visionary leader of a new era for the Montoro fortune, and more importantly, Julian's true love. The revelation of the truth, though painful for Julian at first, freed him from his mother's chains and a pre-written life. Together, Ilara and Julian transformed the Montoro fortune and legacy. The family mansion was converted into the headquarters of the Rios Montoro Foundation for Art and Gastronomy, a beacon of innovation and support for young talents. Ilara's vision of desserts that tell stories materialized in a haute cuisine school, where ethics, passion, and creativity were taught, and where her own family's ancestral recipes, those that had been stolen centuries ago, were recovered and taught. Her grandmother, Doña Isabel, with the peace and joy of seeing Ilara triumph and with the best medical care, experienced a remarkable recovery, returning to baking and sharing her own stories with the foundation students. El Dulce Refugio flourished, expanding into a network of bakeries and cafes that became synonymous with quality, authenticity, and social responsibility. The reunions were moving. Don Manuel, the old baker whom Ilara always visited, looked at her with tears in his eyes and a smile of pride. Former customers who had looked at her with disdain now lined up to visit her, their gazes filled with respect and admiration. Ilara welcomed them all with her usual warmth, her unbreakable inner peace, her humility intact. The relationship with Julian blossomed. The fake marriage turned into an unbreakable union, based on truth respect, and a deep, sincere love that had been born amidst adversity. Julian, freed from his mother's expectations, found his own purpose by Ilara's side, dedicating himself to the management of the foundation and supporting each of her dreams. Their new office, in what was once Doña Victoria's study, was a space full of light, art, and life. A reflection of their new home, which was no longer a golden cage, but a sanctuary of love, Leo's laughter, and the sweetness of the desserts Ilara created for them. And so, my dear friend, the story of Ilara Rios and Julian Montoro stands as an enduring testament that true love can emerge from the most unexpected places, even from a calculated farce. And that truth, however hidden, always finds its way to light, sweeping away lies and revealing the true worth of people. It teaches us that material wealth is ephemeral, but that dignity, integrity, compassion, and the courage to fight for what is just are the true treasures a human being can possess. Ilara's story is not just a personal victory, but a beacon of hope for all those who believe that love and justice were just fairy tales. Because, the true value of a human being is not in the surname they bear, but in the nobility of their actions, in the purity of their heart, and in the courage to face the shadows to make the most dazzling truth shine. And so, her legacy would resonate, a symphony of triumph that would continue to be told for generations. A constant reminder that life, sometimes, gives us the most unexpected and beautiful endings when we least expect it, simply by daring to be who we are.